Hey everybody, it's Courtney and I'm back here with another project using Trinity stamps. Today I'm going to be using the Coffee with Character stamp set as well as one of the sentiments from Hello Sweet Friend. And we're actually only going to be using one image from this large stamp set. And I'm going to be creating somewhat of a scene here, but I like to get the most out of my stamp sets, even maybe using them in a non-traditional way. So here I'm just starting with a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I'm just taking my T-square ruler here and a very light pencil line to kind of map out where I want to stamp my little donuts. I want to stamp 12 of them, 3 across, 4 down. So I'm just drawing very light pencil lines, that way I can stamp them as straight as possible. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my images with Blackout ink by Ink on 3. And like I said, I'm going to stamp 3 across, and then I'll go ahead and mask these out. These masks are cut from Post-it notes. These are the full stick Post-it notes, and that way I could stamp just half of what I need and cut 2 at a time. And I just went ahead and masked them out as I went along and continued to stamp my little donuts down, 4 down. Once all of my stamping was complete, I went ahead and removed my masks, and I want to draw in like a bakery box, like the donuts are in a box, like a dozen donuts. So I'm starting off with my pencil in case I make any mistakes. Like I've told you guys before, I'm not an artist in any way. Typically, my scenes will consist of anything that I can do with a ruler or anything that I can trace. I just don't have any artistic ability. So like I said, I'm starting off with my pencil here, and you'll see, I won't show you this whole thing, but I'll go in and erase some lines and, make sure that I have this perfect before I go in with my permanent Copic safe pen. We're going to keep this very simple, like I said. So once I had everything mapped out with my pencil, I will go ahead and go in with an EK Success journaling pen and kind of cover up all of those lines. Some of them I did change up a little bit, and I am going back and erasing as I go, making sure that everything is lined up perfectly. Before you do start your coloring, you will definitely want to make sure that you erase all of your pencil lines that kind of may be showing through some of those black lines. Once you color over them, whether it be Copics or pencils or even watercolor, you'll have a very hard time erasing them. Now, as you see, my box is starting to come together, and I did make it look like, well, I tried to make it look like the top of the box was kind of open, and the top of the box is kind of just there on the top of the card panel. I don't really know how to explain it, but that's where I plan on stamping my sentiment. So once I had all of my lines drawn, we'll move on to the Copic coloring. And I apologize up front. Some of this in the very beginning, I'm kind of off camera a little bit, but I'm basically just starting off with my C1, which is going to be my lightest color. I wanted my bakery box to appear white or a very light gray. And I'm kind of just going through and mapping out my darkest areas. Typically with my gray markers, whether it be the cool grays or warm grays, I usually just go in with my darkest color because they blend so well. But I didn't want to mess up my shadows, so I figured I'd map everything out first. That way, in case I make a mistake, it's easily coverable, if that's a word, with the C1. Next, I'll go in with my darkest color, and I'm just adding a teeny tiny bit of this C3. No, this is the C5. And just putting this in the very darkest areas, so I'm pretty much just putting it underneath these little flaps of the box. Then I'll take my C3 and do small flick marks to extend that color out a little bit, and then finally go back in with that C1 and extend that pretty much all the way, maybe just leaving a very small area of the white. Now I'll show you just this other 2 flaps here, being I was pretty much off camera the first one. Again, starting off with my C5, these are teeny tiny flick marks just there on the bottom of these flaps. And remember, I do have a layer of C1 on here already. It's just very hard to see because it's such a light color. Once I had those little mini flick lines down, I'll move on to my C3 and extend those flicks out a little bit further. And I would say I'm going about halfway for this particular area. Once I had my C3 down, extending that C5 out, I'll move back on into my C1 and extend those out. For the flaps, I pretty much went all the way. The only white part that I left was in the inside of the box, but you could barely notice anyway because all of the donuts are in the way. So once my box was all colored, I'll move on to coloring the donuts themselves. I wanted to color some of the donuts regular and some of them chocolate, but most of them are so covered with the frosting that you couldn't really tell. But I'm only using 2 colors here, going in with my darkest color first, and I'm just creating a shadow in the inside where the little hole of the donut is and underneath where the frosting lies, and then I'll just extend that out with my lightest color. And like I said, you can't even really tell that there was any kind of shading here. These are really small areas. You could get away with just 1 color here. And I'm only using the 2 color combinations for the donuts themselves. The frosting, we will do 4 different color combinations. For the first donut here, I wanted to make it look like it had chocolate frosting. So I'm going to go in right with my darkest color here. And I'm just adding my shading behind in the back of the donut, like where that hole, the hole of the donut is. And then right there on the bottom where that frosting kind of is swooped down or kind of laying over the rest of the donut. Then I'll go in with my mid-tone and just extend that out a little bit, and then go in with my lightest color and leaving a highlight right there on the top of the donut where it would be the lightest and kind of like shiny. For the next donut, I wanted to make this look like it had strawberry frosting, and I'm coloring this the same exact way as I did for the chocolate one, just obviously a different color combination. Going in with my darkest color first and putting my shadows in the same area that I put with the first one, blending that out with my mid-tone color, and then leaving that highlight right there on the top of the donut. Not really worried about the shadow that the donut above it would cast, just kind of keeping the coloring pretty simple here. For the next donut, this is going to appear to have vanilla frosting, and my darkest color here is actually my highlight color of the chocolate donut. For the final one, this would, I guess, be lemon. So I'm going to go in with some Y markers, again, putting that darkest color down first, extending that out with a mid-tone, and then finally the highlight color. And I did color all of these donuts the same way, just kind of mixing them up a little bit. Once all of my donuts were colored, I took a brown colored pencil, and this is one of the polychromos, but you can use anything here. And I just added a few little lines on some of the donuts just to make it appear as if they had some chocolate sprinkles. I didn't add these to all of them, just a few here and there. Next, I fixed up some of my areas that I was a little bit messy or where my color may have bled out from the box itself. These are pretty light colors, being I used my C marker, so I'm just using my colorless blender here. I didn't feel the need to use my white gel pen. It was pretty easy. As long as you use just the tip of the marker, kind of push that color back in, let it dry before you add. If you need to add more colorless blender, make sure that panel is dry, or else you're just going to continue to move around that color. So you'll see me go back in some of these same areas with my colorless blender and fix them up a little bit more. Once that was all fixed up, I did trim my panel down just a little bit because I measured totally wrong and it was not centered. So I wanted to make sure that that box did appear centered on the card panel. Next, I took one of the sentiments from Hello Sweet Friend. I figured this went well with my little theme of my card here. Line that up onto an acrylic block, and I'll be stamping this with VersaFine Onyx Black ink right there on the lid or the top of the box. I did stamp off on a scratch piece of paper just to make sure that everything was lined up correctly. And you'll see that I must have had something stuck to my stamp there, probably a cat hair, and I have a little line of that ink. So once that's dry, I'll just take my sand eraser and fix that up a little bit. I just glued this down with my Tempo Mono Multi Glue flat to an A2 size card base. And I started off by adding a little bit of shimmer to just some of the frosting on the donuts. And then I kind of went a little crazy and added it to all of them. But that is the card for today, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by and have a great day. Bye.